My name is Daniela. I'll be hosting this session for tonight. This session that is organized by ISACA, or hosted and organized by ISACA Netherlands chapter, and also in collaboration with NORIA, the Netherlands Internal Audit Institute, de beroepsorganisatie van IT auditors. I'll go through some information, and actually Ramzi, he's in the background helping me out with hosting the session for tonight. He will go through some announcements. The session for tonight will be about the evolution of SIEM versus SOAR, and we'll give you more details as we go. But first of all, housekeeping. Please mute your microphone and stop sharing your video as soon as you enter the session. So if you can check once in a while if you're still muted and your camera's off. Make sure that you have your first name and last name on the Teams session, so that we can next week we can send you the CPEs or the CPE certificates. And the presentation is being recorded. The slides will be shared sometime after the session. And if you have any questions, please don't forget to include #question at the beginning, the question on the chat. And thank you, Ramzi, for putting it on the chat as well. Now some quick announcements, Ramzi. Over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I just would like to do the quick announcements from ISACA Global. Basically, the CISA exam is getting changed, and a new version is being released 1st of May. Please check the CISA exam content outline, the URL that we just provided, to get the latest updates, because the new exam will start beginning of August. Moving to our local announcements. So basically, we have the 3 upcoming square tables. I would like to announce that normally we would stop the square tables in July and August. This year we thought it's a good idea to continue in July, because there is a lot of burning topics that we want to, let's say, discuss before the summer vacation. And we will only be stopping in August. So 3rd of July, we have why cybersecurity insurance is or is not a waste of money. It's going to be for you to, and after the session, to decide. And 10th of July, we have from firefighters to business enablers, embracing zero trust as a strategy. And then we have a different topic post the August timeline, which is diversity in cybersecurity. And I would like to just comment that diversity in general could be an empowering tool to everywhere. A side note that I just posted the house rules on the chat. There is a small problem with it. I think I made a mistake that it's not recorded and the slide will not be shared. Actually, the session is both recorded and the slides will be shared. If we can move forward, we want to make sure that you mark your calendars. 6th of November 2024 is the big risk event. The risk event this year is under the term Purple Ocean. And for anyone who doesn't know why the Purple Ocean, I would say Google Purple Ocean strategy versus blue and red. It's a very interesting topic. And the idea is we want to embrace and empower change. So please mark your calendars, the risk event, 6th of November in Spant in the lovely city of Bussum in the Netherlands. The event is available for ISACA members and non-ISACA members. There is, of course, this is a paid event, so there's a difference in the ticket pricing, but it is available. Once more, after a long time of not doing it, we are, along with our partners, NORIA, the Dutch IT Auditors Institute, as well as PVEB, Platform for Informatic Veiligheid, or Platform for Information Security, if my English and Dutch is not wrong, we are organizing with them a cybersecurity congress. Expect the unexpected is the, let's say, current scene in cybersecurity. Everything is changing. I will be a little bit repeating what a lot of other people will tell you. AI is changing the game, whether if we're talking the past few years about like machine learning and algorithms and helping actually related to today's topic, the SOAR versus SIEM, get better in detection or arbitrage of the incidents or others. I would leave that to the speaker. Or if we are talking about Gen AI and the rise of phishing and let's say campaigns that are more sophisticated to detect with the naked eye. Most of us have the security training or security awarenesses in our organizations, whether we provided the security professionals or we get it as an employees. And it tells you about like the domain name that has a problem or typos or mistakes. Using Gen AI, you can even emulate a certain tone of voice when it comes to how you write the emails. So it's really expect the unexpected. The date is 9th of October. Please feel free to reach out to any of the three organizations if you would like to attend. I think by next week we will have the URL available and we'll share it with everyone for the Security Congress. That's it from my side for the announcements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramsey. And expected and unexpected. I'm already imagining that there won't be any presenters or any hosts, and you and I will be replaced by some kind of AI cyborg or entity, or I still don't know how to call them.
Nobody has seen me, Daniela, so I'm not a real person. Apologies, but I'm already AI.
Oh, sorry. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have disclosed that information.
That's why I was hinting about diversity.
Yes, we need to be inclusive also for with the machines. Without further ado, introducing our speaker for this evening, LJ, which is much easier for me to say than Lirian. LJ Koning is its CTO for the Onto IT and also the founder, and his specialty or his area of focus is zero trust. LJ, could you please give us some more information about yourself? How did you get to embrace zero trust and how you want to implement it? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I will certainly do so. Can you see my slides? Right, my first slide right now.
That's fine. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining. Daniela, thank you. Noria and Isaka, thank you very much for hosting the session and inviting me. Yes, my name is Jan Koning, and indeed, if I go to the United States and want my coffee at Starbucks, my name will be LJ, because then I actually get that coffee. By the way, if you have any questions during this session, feel free to just chat them with the hashtag questions as before, and we can do that during the, we can respond to those during the session. I'd love to keep it interactive. Today's subject, before I introduce myself, is this is the thing I want to argue, actually, that I believe that we should, the vast majority of our efforts, our money, our time and everything, we should put in enhancing prevention of our environment. Now, and what's the role of the Security Operations Center in that? What's the SIEM tooling? What's the role of that in there? SOAR, what does it bring you? What does AI bring you there? That's the discussion of today. But indeed, let me first introduce myself, a little bit about the company. Onto it, we are a 100% Dutch-owned cybersecurity company. There's not many anymore. I've come to learn. We were founded in 2005, and we operate a security operations center in Zalbommel. It is actually 24/7. So we also have a security operations center in Plano, Texas. That is for the North American market. So that's nothing to do with what we do here. Here it's actually 24/7. So if you go past the A2 highway here, there should be lights day and night. If not, please call me. I am a real person, so you can actually call me and meet me. So I'm not yet an AI, working on it. Our core profession, what we've always been doing, even before it was called like that, is zero trust. Very briefly on what we offer, so just so you know what my background is a little bit. Zero trust is what we preach, what we think everybody should do, and now that has become a little bit more difficult to talk about recently, because all the big vendors are always saying, "Hey, I have this zero trust product for you, and we are comply with zero trust 100%. So please buy us," because it's also a bit of a fashionable thing to do. what I'm going to talk about today has to do with how it was originally intended. You see on the picture there's Mr. John Kindervaag, who is the creator of Zero Trust back when he was at Forrester. He worked for us for a while, and we are in touch a lot. So I'll tell you lots about that. We also created our OXO platform, which is our SIEM and SOAR solution, and I'm based on the technology we use there and how we apply these technologies. I'm going to talk about that and explain to you how we believe this should be done. And the first thing is our MSOC, Managed SOC, which is more than just a security operations center. The M stands for managed, which means that we actually manage the controls, so the firewalls, endpoint protection, clouds, and all that, because that's what I strongly believe a security operations center should do. And my role, I'm CTO, so that means that partnerships, technical matters, the OXO platform, that's all my responsibility to get that done. So I came about a statistic the other day. I printed this here on the slide, and that looks good actually. There's investment in security analytics, good thing. A lot in AI. My question immediately is, okay, what does it actually mean? And also, people are thinking, are believing that coping with the security requirements is becoming easier over the years, which is, well, quite optimistic statistics. And then I got thinking about this. How do I feel about this? Is this a good thing? Yes. But there's also a challenge, and that's what I would like to talk about, because security analytics, AI, most of AI, is very reactive technology in its core, at least. So where are we investing in? And that brings me to what I think is a core problem that I face all the time when I'm talking to customers, when we're helping our customers getting a strategy for cybersecurity, for Zero Trust over the finish line. And it's a very old thing, the CIA triad, where the center of gravity of this triangle should be in the middle. So integrity, confidentiality, and availability, that should be a compromise maybe, but at least it should be a discussion. It should be these should be equals. And it hasn't always been easy. Because availability if your application is down, what do you do? Availability is the core thing. And the cybersecurity folks, I apologize, we haven't been all that great always. IPSs that would block production traffic and bringing down a site for a long time, and the cybersecurity department being the department of no, which I strongly oppose, because I believe that there's so much technology, so much good ways of enabling organizations, applications, data to be available to everybody who needs it in a non-intrusive way. So the technology has come a long way, I think. So it is very possible to properly balance these three. However, what do I see in practice a lot? That the extent of the availability, the weight of availability is so omnipresent to everything all the time. And I think that's a problem. There is I'll share a link later. We have a YouTube channel and a podcast. It's called Threat Talks, where we talk about these subjects. There was a recent one where we talked to the CIO of Vitens, Matthijs Zwart, about this issue, because availability is the primary concern of the CIO, right? And the CISO, and in most areas also a privacy officer, are there for confidentiality and integrity, if I may oversimplify this a little bit. And this it's not always a proper balance there. And the funny thing, or the interesting thing about Vitens, is that the CIO and the CISO is actually the same person. I highly recommend reviewing this. And we also see other ramifications of this. I mean, there is another investigation we did to the HSE, the hospitals in Ireland. They had suffered from a massive ransomware attack. And if you look at the aftermath of what happened there, is that availability was their main thing. And security, yes, only if it's not intrusive. If you can prove to me that it's not intrusive, there was no change window possible to upgrade, to patch, to install new firewalls and all that. And so they were very much behind. And that brings me to this. I strongly believe that security, confidentiality, and integrity is tomorrow's availability. And I think most people are aware of this, but I don't. We are not acting enough upon that. If you ask me. So what the result of that all is that we are talking about the wrong things. I think. I mean, there are so many organizations I talk to that are still talking about, must my IPS be in blocking mode? Intrusion prevention systems, next generation firewalls, they have this in them. This is designed to block unwanted stuff from your network, attacks that people attack on your portal, internal machines that trying to gather intelligence on your environment. We have technical capability to stop all that, but there are many organizations that have this equipment but do not enable it. And this is a discussion. And why? Because we have availability, that is first and foremost the thing to do. And security, only if you can prove to me that it's not intrusive. There's a few other things. For example, the ease with which organizations simply open their Office 365, for example, to the world, to their contractors, for example. You get an account, yes, maybe limited, but we've helped organizations where a contractor was breached, and what they got access to is email, and there was data sold on the dark web, and all the controls worked. It's just that the controls of the supplier didn't. And this is a problem we have solved. That we can make sure that even if you have a contractor, the traffic they need to go to your email environment actually flows through your security controls. And this is what, for example, Zero Trust dictates that you do. But availability, those nasty security controls, we shouldn't have them. And I think that is still today far too many times security that loses this discussion. So, what should we talk about? A few examples. My most favorite one is, I believe what you should do is, once you have your idea on what your most critical applications are, and there's, DORA, NIS2, they all dictate these things, and it's actually very good in developments in that area, that we are going through our critical assets and then look at those critical assets and individually think of how do we protect those. Do we have all the attack techniques that exist in the world? Do we have protection against that? That's a different kind of conversation, if that's what you have. Multi-factor authentication, I mean, it should be a no-brainer by now. We should be worried about phishing multi-factor. We've seen a certain bank the other day that got, the users got hacked. This whole multi-factor authentication is there, but attackers are finding more and more ways to, despite all those technologies, register a new multi-factor device and then use that. We actually saw that a couple of times last year in our SOAR practice. And there are new technologies. It's not easy to implement it, I'll immediately admit that, but that's the conversation that we should have, like FIDO2, WebAuth, and that need to be implemented. That's the discussion we should have. So, as a result, because if you are a CISO or otherwise concerned with security and you are not allowed to do too much of preventive work, the thing that in my mind matters most, what are you going to do? Well, you procure different things. And I'm not saying this is bad at all. We'll get to that. I mean, it's good to have these things, but we're investing in SIEM technology. We're investing in MDR, which is better because it has a lot of preventive capability in it. Of course, we need this retainer CSIRT, again, NIS2, for example. You can't live without it, and if you get breached, yes, you need some help because you are overwhelmed at that moment. So it's really nice to have some experienced eyes watching over you and helping you. SOC service often, but yeah, if this is the main thing that we go after as security professionals, I always have to think of the CISO that, unfortunately, I can't mention his name. He might be here today. I don't know. I haven't checked the attendees list. They told me, we had a breach one day and we were totally helpless. I mean, we didn't know what to do. We were ambushed completely. And then, of course, we bought SIEM and we bought an MDR solution. And we got another attack the other day. We now know exactly how we got breached and where patient zero was and how the threats spread, etc. PS, we still got hacked. And so you did a lot of investment in technology. I mean, for the better, I agree. But at some point, it is like a little bit like giving up, honestly. And I think we shouldn't. If this is all we can do, or if this is an important part of what we do, I think shouldn't be our focal point. I'm not saying security operations centers are useless or SIEM solutions are useless, and we get to that. But that is a rear-view mirror where you look into the past, and there's so many things that we can do in a preventative way. So that brings me to what we should do. And first, let's talk a little bit about zero trust, what we say make zero trust happen. And I'm sure lots of you have a lot of knowledge about zero trust. So, but for those who don't, and just to explain to you what we mean by zero trust, let me briefly get into this. What you see here is the 5 steps to zero trust. And for that, I have to tell you why we have those. I'll explain to you a little bit about this one. This is a report. If you haven't seen it, I'll make sure that I'll send you a link with the slide deck in the end, in a couple of days probably, with a link to this. So what's the origin of this? A while ago, because of all the leaks at the NSA in the United States, that's one of the many reasons, the President of the United States issued an executive order which briefly stated, government agencies, go build zero trust networks. And great. I mean, we were really happy about that, of course. I think zero trust to me is the only actual strategy that works. So that's a good thing. And then naturally, everybody was like, okay, but what does it mean? And that's when the world woke up, the cyber world woke up, and everybody was like, yeah, we have a zero trust product, and let me sell you this zero trust solution. And then the request came, okay, so what is zero trust? How do we define what a good zero trust, tactics are, for example? And that's when the president installed a committee, the NSTAC committee. And there's, to my pride actually, there's one non-US company mentioned as an author of this report, which is onto it. And that's because John Kinnervaag worked for us. And he wrote the majority of this report on this, based on his, started with his work at Forrester, where he came up with the idea of, he basically defined a next generation firewall. It didn't exist yet. I remember talking to him about that. And then we built our Octa platform around those ideas, and work together a lot to bring that to fruition. And this is what the result is. And the report talks about 4 principles. I'll skip over them today, and the 5 steps of zero trust. The steps that you repeatedly take to get to a zero trust environment. I recommend to read this. And by the way, all organizations have copied the concept since then, and the terminology and all. Very briefly, it's 5 steps that you repeatedly take, and they are aimed towards bolstering your cyber resilience. That's the key point. Get better and better all the time. Yes, it is part of it is identity. Yes, part of it is segmentation. But it's abstract. It's not about the technology itself or anything. It's a thought that you have to embrace once, and then you apply it over and over again. And then I always say to my salespeople, zero trust itself is for free. You embrace it, and then and they hate me for it, of course. So briefly, define the attack surface. I'll dive a little bit more in that in a minute, but this is the complete opposite of how the cybersecurity world thinks usually. Define the attack surface. We are taught to think in attack surfaces, which means that there is some spot in our environment that's weak and that hackers attack. So we think from the attacker. That's how it all starts. How our industry is built. And I have a fundamental problem with this, because that means that if you, like in every organization, there's cybersecurity salespeople, big vendors in Tel Aviv, in Silicon Valley, come to your doorstep and say, hey, you have this problem. I can prove it because I already did my research, or here, test my product for you. And I have a solution, my product, my service, whatever it is. and see you're vulnerable, buy this, and you're done. And well, you better hope that those sales guys come to your doorstep in the right order, because at the end of your budget, there's always a new attack vector that you didn't think of that needs to be closed. And I think we should turn it completely around. And that's what Zero Trust also teaches you. What you do is you define what you want to protect, your data, because it's all about not losing your data. That could be the ATMs if you're in a financial institution. That could be your medical records. That could be, I don't know, your trade portal if you're a web shop, for example. Your HR data, your email, for example. I have some examples, more examples in a minute. And then what we do, we are going to build protection around this. That's the idea. First we define it, then briefly we map the transaction flows, which means we figure out who needs access to this data. Once we know this, we can architect the network. Get to that in more detail later. Once we know we've built everything, we put the controls in place, then we can create a policy. That's a very operational thing that where we get to manage services, for example, in our case. And then in the end, we go to monitor and maintain what's been going on and look what close to the PDCA's, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, because we want to see whether we did a proper job and learn from it. And what we've been talking about so far, security analytics and all, that's most of it is step 5, but that means you start at the end. So to explain what a protect service is, it's something we talked about the CIA triad, where the CIO and the CISO sometimes are not in the same boat. They are not aligned in what their requirements are. So in our experience, this conversation about cybersecurity needs to get all the way to the CEO level. And in order to explain to folks who do not have a background in IT, this is what I often use. Suppose you are in the United States and you ask an average American, tell me who knows best to protect people? Well, you're going to end up with the question, with the answer, this is the Secret Service. Those are very good at protecting stuff that really matters. So this is a picture of the inaugural parade of President Obama to illustrate what we mean by protect service. And the Secret Service is there, and the Secret Service, everybody who works for the Secret Service knows 3 things exactly. The first one is, who is the president? The second one is, where is he? Where should he be? And the third one is, who should have access to the president? We should ask the same question about every piece of data in our organization. Then what happens? Well, we have perimeter security on the outside of our security domain. And if you look closely to those people there, they have their hands in their pockets. I can't blame them. It's January 6th or so, so it's winter, Washington, it's cold, right? But they're not really ready to strike, right? Ready to defend. That's not what their job is. In cybersecurity, often it is. There's this hard outer shell that needs to be penetrated. That's how we architect every IT bit that we've created over the last few decades. What matters is the protect service. So what the Secret Service does, they put their controls, their firewalls, their endpoint protection, really, really close to the thing they protect. And look, they have their hands out of the pockets. They are ready to shoot. That's what happened in America, of course. And they together form what we call a micro perimeter. And of course, we also have monitoring, the Security Operations Center that looks at it from a distance, but they have no power in actually guarding the president should someone approach the president. Now, and this in a nutshell to me is Zero Trust. This is the way of thinking, the train of thought that we must have in any organization. So we see data, and now we put those controls really close to the data that we want to protect, because that's the most effective. That's the only spot where it becomes simple to do. Example, a few protect services here you see, and what I want to make clear here, there's every organization has a list of applications usually. What's important here also is that critical components are included. DORA says a lot about that. It is the chain of of environments. I mean, if you have this is a list of a demo environment. So it's this is a financial institution. What you see there is, for example, the Swift gateway. You see the mainframe, ATMs, etc. But what when we design services, when we define protect services, we include everything that they need. So if it's the ATMs, it's not just the machines, the ATM machines, but everything that's really interconnected with it. It's a broader view than just a database, for example, or just a server. It is stuff that we cleverly group together. It's the chain.
LJ, maybe
Yeah.
sorry for the interruption, because we already have a couple of questions, and what
Sure.
my question actually is, what are we looking at right now?
This right here. This is what this is our way of solving this. So this is our OXO platform that we offer to our customers to keep track of
XOR, okay,
their security.
okay.
Yeah, well, we call it OXO. It is a SOAR solution, but that's not the point. The point is just as an example to make it really tangible what we mean by what a protect service is.
And talking about protection and actually prevention, there's a good question here from Joost Osdam. In my honest opinion, and related to the NIST CSF, SIEM is part of detection and enables response. Could you elaborate on the quote that SIEM is part of protect, that is in the prevention?
Yes. Do you mind if I answer that? Because I have a couple of slides on that where I argue about this. And my short answer is limited. But yes, we'll get to that. It's a very important question. I'll get back to that.
Well, so we need to go back to availability. Also, Ramsey has a question, but maybe we can do it later on. But yes, of course, that we needed to here to understand the critical differences, right, between the SIEM and a SOAR and XOR solution.
Absolutely. That's what I'm gonna. I'll finish a little bit about on zero trust, and then after that I'll go into the evolution of SIEMs and how where we are right now and what the value of it is. So let me briefly go. I mean, the most important thing about zero trust is this core belief, right? And then I'll skip over step 2. Step 3 is important for this reason. What you need to do is look at the different controls that you can apply to your attack surfaces. So instead of buying a firewall, buying endpoint protection for the company or for all endpoints, all servers, etc. That's what we do not recommend. What you do, you look at ATMs, for example, here, or if I scroll a little bit down, Active Directory, you consider the different controls that could be there. They are around firewalling, they are around encryption, around authentication. The reason we do this is to lessen the scope of what's important. So we know, for example, if you need DORA compliance, ISO 27001 compliance, we know what kind of we have a mapping to the products that you should buy. I recommend you do that. You think of an IT system and then a protect service, and then make the judgment which measures do I need to take, so you can then also make a gap analysis on where you are. Okay, I'll skip over creating the policy. That's the heavy lifting. That's the operational stuff. It's a big part of our job, and that then brings me to this monitor and maintain. We should so ideally we first do all those things so we know what to protect. Be really working on prevention, and then we look at how we best do the last step, step 5. Now, why is this important? Yes, it is a rearview mirror in a way, right? But it's not. There are a lot of users for SIEMs and for SOARs, and why? Well, the most important ones that we have identified is well, from a zero trust perspective, it is validate that everything works, right? You can do step 1 to 4. And you want to know for sure that you did a good job there. Now, then you want to the APTs that are very slow in your organization. Those are typically there's preventative capability in SIEMs and SOAR, especially if we put AI in the mix. We'll talk about it in a bit. That can see patterns, and that's a very good use case for SIEMs. However, I should stress that most problems that we see with organizations is not in that area. Most things are patch management going wrong, authentication problems, passwords that leak, multi-factor being disabled, all that stuff. SIEM doesn't really help you a lot with this, not even the latest ones. But for those more advanced attacks, it's important to follow the attacker on its path, and then we also have the time. It doesn't need to be like, well, 15 minutes or so is long in Cyberland. You'd rather block immediately. Evidence collection is also a very important one. I will get to that in a bit. So briefly, I mean, SIEM is really old. In 2005, it was looking at the logs, more like a log management system, limited capacity, the hardware wasn't there, so quickly we went to 2.0 version, which was distributed. So there's many different appliances that SIEM vendors would love to sell you, put them everywhere in an organization, and then of course there was a lot of events, and those events, it's a data offload for the SOC, and yeah, it wasn't really that effective because, how do you prioritize? It's been a big issue. Almost 10 years ago, machine learning came along. It's not a really new thing. 10 years is a lot in IT, especially in cyber. Machine learning came along that helped us in prioritizing those events that actually matter. And it's an important thing to have that. I mean, if there's so much data, there's so many false positives, somehow there needs to be a system to figure out the right spots, right? I think we should go to 100% coverage. Every log file that matters should get a verdict. In 2015, we were nowhere there. We are still not completely there. AI helps. But it's hard to get to 100%. Probably never really well. In fact, there are systems who do get a verdict on each and every event, and that of course has to be automated. And that's where a couple of years ago we saw the start of two things. One is AI to help, so the enhanced version of machine learning, where machine learning is mostly static analysis on data and anomaly detection, and now AI starts to see much more difficult patterns, which is for those APTs important. Now, let's look at this graph for a moment. Here, what you see in the last couple of decades. And you see there where SOAR started. That's to me the key thing with SOAR. SOAR is a good attempt to take the knowledge that you get from what's happening in the environment and convert that into an action that prevents, hopefully prevents, blocking a user, for example. So we see weird behavior. The response is that there is a call to AD, user is being blocked. Putting IP addresses of misbehaving visitors on your site on a blacklist, so firewall now blocks it preventively. That's what the orange line stands for. What we also see over the years, and with the machine learning and especially the AI, you see a huge uptake in the amount of events that we can actually judge. The whole reason we built our own platform is that we wanted the 100% coverage. We want every single event to be inspected, and I think we should, because in our experience, the top 10 events or the most critical events rarely ever are the real problem. It's always this one thing that is that didn't draw a lot of attention by itself, that turns out to be the problematic thing. I'll show you in a bit how I think this should be done. Now, let me explain a little bit more on the orange line. So you see that went up, but it's hard to get that really high. So the prevention capability of a SOAR, and that's to your question, the gentleman that asked a question about the preventive SOC. Um, it
Sorry,
is really
preventive SIEM, not SOC.
preventive SIEM. Sorry, preventive SIEM. Yeah, it is always at the end of the kill chain. That is a bit of a problem. So we've seen a lot of things. Things already went south, and now we block a user. Now we flag that a user does impossible travel, for example. And most of it is almost every time there is someone already in your environment. Huh? So someone already got credentials, for example. So ideally, we do not when an event gets into the SIEM connected to a SOAR that then does the action towards a system should not happen. Of course, there's always going to be a flaw. So yes, we need to do this, but every hour of work, every euro that we spend most of it should be applied to making sure that authentication is properly done, for example. And I believe that the amount of preventive work that we can do with SIM technology, with SOAR technology, the combination of the two, is limited. It will flatten out. That may be different in 5 years, 10 years maybe, but that's only when we have a very good automated way of doing SOAR-like things. And today, every AI-based SIM solution, the SIM solution is AI, but the SOAR solution is always groundwork. It's always configuring, putting use cases in. Use cases, I mean, they help, but it's still a way of patching. It's just to get this orange line up is a lot of effort. Is this at least in part an answer to your question?
Well, the question maybe, Joost, if you want to raise your hand if the question was not answered. But I do have a question there, LJ. So we're seeing exactly the overload of information from the scene, correct? That is still happening, and we're trying to improve the features that the SOAR offers. You mentioned AI, and in your view, how can you still balance the information overload and the integrity or the veracity of the information that you're feeding the SOAR with? Because the SOAR will be as good as it's actually configured, and
Absolutely.
there's still a need for human intervention, not only solely relying on AI response, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So what AI helps us with is to filter out stuff that happens all the time, which is okay. So if you are looking at if you don't have AI, for example, a large upload or a large download is difficult to view if this is like a data leak. Someone puts a lot of files in Dropbox, or someone actually is moving data legitimately. So what you get there is a lot of false positive. AI helps you doing this because you get profiles for users based on their past behavior. There's also a risk in that, by the way, because I mean attackers can also exploit that by gradually becoming a different persona. But that's what happens. So it's solving a massive set of equations basically, and that's what AI is good at. So we can see this user is a system administrator, does this stuff all the time, for example. So that is okay. But if someone else suddenly starts doing such a thing, that may be something else. And what AI does is very good at finding patterns like that and making sure that those whistles and bells that lead to false positive is going down. So rate of false positive is going down. But my whole point indeed is there is a limit to this. It is not. It will not prevent organizations from being hacked. If you have the perfect SOAR, you have the perfect SIM, you will still be in trouble. If you didn't do the first 4 steps, making sure you have a more or less impenetrable environment. That's what I mean by this picture. The orange line will only go up into a certain extent, at least for now. So, and how can we make it more? I'll spend a few 2 minutes on that. So this rear view mirror is great, but like I said, yeah, it's the end of the kill chain, and our jobs is to make sure that as soon as possible, as soon as we know that an attack is there, we need to stop it. Right? And that's what our push should be towards the beginning of the kill chain. Now, and I'll show you a little bit briefly how we approach this with our technology, and there's different. I mean, it doesn't matter it's ours. There's multiple ways of doing it, of course. And what's important to get first of all is what kind of logging do you feed your system? Because if you talk to a SIEM vendor, they will tell you give us everything. Of course, I mean the more logging, the more equipment you need, the more so that there's no natural break on that from a vendor perspective. We try to be a little bit more targeted. I encourage you to do so. So there's raw data that we see, and raw data that can be interpreted by AI for anomalies, right? That's a good thing. But there's also firewalls, endpoint protection that turn this raw data that doesn't in itself contain any security value into security events, interpreted events. That's what you see in the orange on the left. And that's so, for example, a server log that just says, hey, this application has been started. This user is now going to a URL, for example. That is not of much actionable value to a security operations center, and that's not necessarily useful in a SIEM SOAR solution. However, with AI and with IPSs and all kinds of equipment, these can be turned into actual security events, like we saw a SQL injection attack, or we saw a user visiting a malicious site, and that's the information you need to have. And that's therefore also step one is very important. That becomes now because we need to understand the context in which this happened. If you want to become compliant with DORA, with PCI DSS, whatever, there's always a scope where this applies to. And it's a pity if you would have to go through the weeds of every log file of every system everywhere to get there. So what we always encourage you to do is to dissect all the events that you get, cut out those parts and prioritize those that you need because the big value is in there. We talked about protect servers before, so the important protect servers should be protected with the most precise attention, I would say. Then there's playbook. So and I think what the thought process here should be that every SIEM and SOAR vendor should do, that there's three types of events that come out. Every interpreted event should be judged. We already know about IOCs. That's what SIEMs have had since 2010 or so. That means bad behavior that we understand. This is where what we call rules of engagement, ROE, what a SOAR does. So we see something known bad, and that known bad should have an automated response. Really important that you do that. However, we're just talking about known stuff, so the assumption here is that we can define bad stuff extensively, completely, which I don't agree to, but we need to do it because it's there is value in this. This makes the value of a SIEM actionable. However, the vast majority of all log files, in our experience, about 1 in 100,000 to 200,000 events, do not match any IOC, and we call this an IOG, indicator of good, which is the opposite, which is proper logging that we can expect. And I think that a system like that should be there because you want, for every log file, you want to understand, okay, this is we get it why this is here. For example, someone trying to send you a spam email. Yeah, of course it happens. That's okay. We're not going to look at it, but for a reason, because we know it happens. This mail server is connected to the internet. We know there's protection in place. We validated that that protection worked, and therefore we don't look at it. It's important to do so. Why? Because that's where the magic happens, the residue events that you are there. So it doesn't meet anything that we know, no IOG, it doesn't match any IOC. What is it? And that's what you need to investigate and make better. And if that's you can make an IOG for it, an IOC, or program your SOAR to respond to those events. You want to see the stuff that you haven't seen before.
Yeah, I have to interrupt for a second, Lou, because for legal purposes, we're a non-profit organization, so I have to just put that disclaimer out there that you are putting this as a reference architecture. I know that you are a vendor
Absolutely.
also, but
Absolutely.
we, as ISACA, let's say Netherlands, we do not sponsor or let's say solicit any kind of commercial thing towards that product. And I think everything you say could be done with other products, right? We can do it
This is the
with
philosophy.
Microsoft Sentinel. We can
Yeah,
do it with others.
yeah, absolutely.
I apologize for the interruption, but I had to come in because legally we're not allowed to sponsor any product. And also, it's part of our, let's say, engagement terms and conditions. So I had to clarify that to everyone.
Yeah, thanks very
Apologies,
much for the
please go ahead.
clarification. Absolutely,
Yep.
and you're absolutely right. This is about how you apply SIM and SOAR technology in your organization. What your strategy should be. Yes, of course we do it like that. That's what but that's because of the this vision, this strategy that you should do. And indeed, there's in many ways you can do this. It just for the audience to understand the kind of things you should ask if you're talking about a subject and what's important from my perspective. That brings me to the main takeaways for today. I think the core problem that we should work on is to make sure that we balance the shift back from an emphasis on availability to both security should play a more dominant role in this. And then if you're investing in a security operations center, in a SOAR, in a SIEM technology, make sure it always pushes towards prevention, which means to the start of the kill chain. You want to, a firewall rule that blocks a packet is so much better than a SOC analyst that has an AI-guided event explaining how this packet is malicious, and then has to manually respond or clean it up. And it is in the vast majority of cases that I see, it is possible to do so. And my advice to do so: take the zero trust principles and start with that, and your SIM and SOAR should be part of that whole journey and fit into that instead of the other way around. I promise to include a link to this if you want to know more about the subject. This is all to educate on ransomware attacks, how to prevent those, what the role of a security operations center could be. Yesterday we aired an episode with John Kindervaag, the creator of Zero Trust, in his future perspective, also on what SIMs do. I recommend taking a look at that as well. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and let's open it for some more questions.
Thank you, Ajay. And thank you for the presentation and for the overview on the architecture. I do have a question that is pending from Ramsey, actually. Ramsey,
Yeah.
if you allow me, it's about
Yeah. So
availability.
it stayed for a long time. I come from multiple backgrounds when it comes to that. I was a consultant at some point and an operational manager and engineer. So when you mentioned that availability is overinflated, but availability is the one that generates the money. The service is the one that generates the money. So I want to know your point of view about how you want to handle this, because if you go to any for example, telecommunication industry, where I come from, it's very, very hard to really get time off because the users don't want to lose their mobile access or their internet access or this or that. So how do you resolve these? That's a conundrum that's very hard to actually resolve.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I'm flipping in the wrong way through my slides. True. So this is the argument. I think we learn often, because things went south, that security is a factor. But it's less visible. So if you do a risk analysis, putting more equipment in, putting policies in that could block stuff, intended to block bad stuff, of course, there's always a risk that something breaks. And that risk is not zero, and therefore it's in many industries. I mean, healthcare, I had that example of it could cost lives. Huh? So what's crucial as an organization is to be able to swiftly, if things go south, go off for the wrong reasons, to swiftly detect this. That's where SIEM and the SOAR can also help, alerting all that, and immediately make sure that there is an exception made, or within 15 or 30 minutes there is a resolution to that. That is a safeguard that you want to be put in, and that's a lot of conversation we actually have with customers. How do we make sure of that? So if you enable your IPS, or you put a proxy server in that could block weird behavior, if it blocks, what's your action? And that's a conversation we should have to balance this CI versus A. I'm not saying it's easy. So organizations who have suffered from an outage learn the hard way. I've seen that happen as well.
I think in today's world, Liwa, everyone is going to suffer at some point from an outage. It's just a matter of when. To be honest, I'm hopeful that we will reach a situation where we can say prevention is the main mode. But to be honest, with the amount of software that's coming out of the factory, as I like to call it, it's very hard that all the software will be patched on time. It's very hard. Now we have also the supply chain, which is something you touch upon lightly at some point. Today I was doing some assessment on third parties of a third party of a third party, and guess what? Everyone is using, of course, AWS, GCP, OpenAI, all the known contenders, and Snowflake. And as you know, Snowflake has had recently one of the incidents. It became public, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Nothing against them. Everyone will get at some point a vulnerability. But then it gets you to ask a question like, how much things are interconnected now? It's almost as if we're all connected to a mainframe, and at some point that mainframe gets hacked and we're all hacked.
Yeah, no, it's certainly true. And yes, you need to have a CSIRT, and you need to be sure that you have a plan if bad stuff happens. There's two things. One is it does not give you permission to not think about prevention first. I believe. I strongly believe.
No, I agree. Right? I agree with you with that one.
And that can be difficult. That's one thing. The other thing is if you get breached, of course, quick reaction, but also make sure the blast ratio is small. So if things break, an application breaks, that shouldn't affect the whole organization. And that's where Zero Trust can also help you, because a huge part of it, I mean, if you think in these protect services, and then the security, remember the beast, the car Obama was in, there's 1,000 cars in your organization, and they all have this kind of protection. So if one breaks, it does not automatically mean that the data center is breached and everything else is breached. And that's crucially important, because the most hacks that we see there's always lateral movement. You always go from one spot to the other first. And if you have a Zero Trust environment, you break into one application, much harder to do so, first of all, and then it's just that application. You know where your breach is, and that also tremendously helps. If we're looking at if you have a breach and you need to often within X amount of hours, 72 hours, for example, you need to be able to show, to tell what kind of, the extent of your breach. If you've compartmented your environment, it's much easier to do so. If you have a proper SIEM solution, it's much better to do so. So that's where that does play a role. But again, I think, yes, it is, we cannot rely just on prevention. We also need the after the fact detection, cleaning up, but I think that the majority should be in prevention.
Yep. I would like to ask one more question before I hand it over to Daniela about in the reference architecture, you showed opening tickets, and then there is, of course, the human factor. So the way I see SIEM was basically made to correlate events. We're talking about you had SIEM 1, 2, and 3, and you mentioned mainly more not the features, but rather the problems. Let's put it that way. In the newest SIEMs, the idea is it helps the security analyst to be able to look at a huge amount of logs and come out with a decision. And even with that, because of the amount of alerts and the amount of false positives, it's very hard to detect that. And this is where SOAR came from, that we automate the use cases that we can handle. But what about the issues with the SOAR? What we cannot handle with the SOAR? I think this was never mentioned in the presentation, so I wanted to ask you about it before we open the floor again to questions.
Yes. The thing, there can be a lot of work that follows from all the events that you see. SOAR, I mean, it is not easy to make a proper use case, to program a proper use case in a SOAR solution, and it is, you try to make make a playbook that is catching a lot of errors. So if you have like your top 10 of events that you have that the SOC has to adhere has to fix all the time, you automate those. But it's like there's so many different things that you could write. There's no end to it, and we need humans to do so. So it's not, I mean, everything you can think of, you can program. That's not the issue. You just need a limited time for that, and that's what we don't have. And that's where AI doesn't help you, because the playbooks are not automatically created there. Because for example, if you want to block a user or a machine, you should have some understanding of how your ID is architected. For example, it's always something. It's always a one-off to create this. It's patches. And the nature of cybersecurity is that it's something different every day, and it changes all the time. So you simply cannot keep up. So thanks to all the technological developments, we can now keep up with the event stream to bring it down to proportions that a human can look at. But the responsive action, that is so diverse, we cannot do that yet, or maybe not at all. And that's why I believe that that there is a limit to that. In addition to that, what I mentioned, a block rule in a firewall is the most powerful thing. You didn't even know the attacker was there, and there's many attacks can be avoided like that, or outbound access from a server, for example. Why would you allow it to the internet? Lots of organizations still have that, but yeah, without knowing the zillion different playbooks that you could write in a SOAR, simply blocking the traffic is much more effective. It's a bit like,
it's something that we will need to see in the future, right, LJ? Because with AI, it's any SOAR solution will have a hard time identifying false negatives, and more than false positives, which of course jeopardize availability. And allow me to slightly disagree with you, Ramzi. From a financial industry point of view, the industry cannot survive, although with some detriment in terms of availability, integrity in terms of decision making, where money is involved, and integrity is of utmost importance. But LJ, if you could maybe guess the future for the usage of these solutions in 2-3 years' time, can you please give us just a short prediction of what's going to happen, and a very short tip that all the attendees can take home?
Yeah, what I think more and more organizations will get to is that all events will be judged. So every log file that exists in an organization, they will all be interpreted and being decided whether there should be an action or not. And more will be automatically handled. That's one thing. 3 years is too short, but after that, playbook, so automatic remediation will also grow. We're not there yet. I mean, compare this to a developer. If you write software, AI is really great because it makes you much more effective. That's what now happens in the SOC as well. You can much quicker get to an answer, much quicker pinpoint where things are. So you get much more efficient in figuring out what's there. However, with the developer, it's not that you can ask, get me this application, and it will build it from the ground up. There's also the human factor there that is today still very necessary. You need to be very specific in what you want, and so the creation of a system, the actual intelligent general AI, is still a human's game today. Now,
and so what would be your 30-second tip, LJ, considering that we're over time?
You mean for the future for?
No, your tip. So if the attendees have some kind of a summary of a takeaway, how would you summarize that in 30 seconds? So give me something for me to take home.
Yeah, I would certainly make sure that you put the prevention everywhere in there. So if you are deploying a security operations center, a SIEM, a SOAR, figure out a measure of the feedback of what this system and this group of people brings you to bolster your prevention.
And well, hopefully the decision makers will also get the gist, and not only from a security point of view, right? Because we're always preaching and well, doing our best. Thank you very much for your presentation, LJ. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope that it was useful. Thank you, Noraya, for helping us, Isaac in Netherlands with the organization of this session. And see you soon. Have a nice evening. Fijne avond.